Hello again, everyone, and thanks once again for joining us here for Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show once again. Up first, let's see, hazardous weather graphics. We've got some illuminated areas. The warning area in red there, that's the Upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country. That's a wind chill warning that kicks into effect late tonight and continues through Wednesday night into early Thursday for wind chills to 70 degrees below zero, especially along the Yukon River near Eagle. And but there'll be wind and low wind chills across that entire zone. And then wind chill advisories out for the Yukon Flats over to the Koyukuk Valley, Tanana, looking for wind chills there all around the greater Fairbanks area, but not including Fairbanks. Wind chills 55 below zero in the yellow areas there. Winter weather advisory out for the Bering Strait coast, St. Lawrence Island for late tonight through tomorrow for increasing winds, snow, blowing snow, visibility is dropping down to a half mile or less at times. And also for the southwest coast, Nunivak Island, Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Delta, wind chill advisory out for snow, blowing snow, and visibility is down to less than, again, half a mile at times with several inches of snow expected, already snowing Nunivak Island and along the southwest coast there. And that's also pushing currently into Bristol Bay, so it's out for tonight into tomorrow. And then there's a heavy snow warning out for the eastern North Gulf Coast, Yakutat, and a big chunk of the Panhandle for heavy snow, anywhere 6 to 12 inches possibly moving into the area there. And on the satellite imagery, pretty dry and colder, especially in northern Panhandle, well, all of the southeast coast today with clearing skies, gusty winds picking up, gusting up toward 50 miles an hour from the north through Lynn Canal, Eldred Rock area as Arctic air pours into the area there, and clear and cold over much of interior Alaska today. Clouds on the increase, and that gave snow actually pushing into Kodiak State Airport, picked up anywhere from about a quarter to maybe half an inch currently so far, and snow moving into Bristol Bay. Rain, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, about a third of an inch falling at over the eastern Aleutians. And let's see, Akun Island had about a third of an inch, as did False Pass, and Cold Bay picked up about 0.15 of an inch, and about a tenth of an inch at St. Paul Island. That fell as rain with the wind swinging around to the south there and pushed temperatures up into the upper 30s. And showers over the eastern Aleutians, Unalaska, lighter amounts as you head west toward Nikolsky, some scattered showers with a weak trough out toward Adak and Atka, and then some clearing with weak ridging over the western Aleutians ahead of the next system farther to the southwest. Otherwise, snow showers ended over the southern Panhandle today, and winds diminished, and light snow flurries also diminished over the eastern Arctic coast. And let's see, I went the wrong direction there with the arrows. There we go. For tonight, see tightening gradient, big 1,054 millibar Arctic high up over the Northwest Territories, and the low there just north now of the Alaska Peninsula, southeast of the Pribilofs, gradient between those two features, really tightening it up there over the eastern southeast interior and much of the central and west part of the interior of Alaska, with Kodiak Island seeing probably some gale force winds coming in the narrow band ahead of that frontal boundary. Snow pushing into southern Cook Inlet, southern Kenai Peninsula into Resurrection Bay. Light snow up into western Prince William Sound, possibly in toward Portage. Maybe Girdwood could see some light snow late tonight, possibly. Clouds start to increase along the coast of the Panhandle late tonight. Otherwise, looking clear and cold with the winds over the northern Panhandle. Light winds down toward Dixon Entrance. Light winds also over the central Aleutians there. And the washing out front brings a little bit of an increase in the winds and precipitation to the western Aleutians. Look for the winds to increase St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait coast, but the snow not quite making it in till late tonight. Maybe tomorrow you're going to be right on the edge there for St. Lawrence Island, but definitely the winds kicking up. Gusts 50 miles an hour out of the northeast, blowing snow, reduced visibilities there. Same thing for the southwest interior, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Should warm up enough for the snow to mix with rain or just become plain rain for the Bristol Bay area and the southern Cook Inlet, southern Kenai Peninsula. Same thing, mixed precipitation for the North Gulf Coast. Probably whatever shows up, Elephant Cove to Yakutat start out as snow, but just look for an increase in clouds over the remainder of the Panhandle. And clouds will start to spill over the Alaska Range, mid and high level clouds. We can see quite a tight gradient there with, again, wind chill warnings out for the 40-mile country upper Tanana Valley. Into the central interior, wind chill advisories. Western Arctic coast quite windy. Central and eastern Arctic coast not quite as windy. And the next system just grazing the central Aleutians there on the north side with kind of a little bit of an increase in the wind and precipitation. Scattered showers shimmy at Attu. Not a bad day coming up for the Fox Islands. Pribilof's light winds, maybe a few rain or snow showers around, and generally cloudy skies. Looking at the outlook for Wednesday, snow finally edges up towards St. Lawrence Island, bucking the east-northeast winds there that will result in quite a bit of blowing snow condition there, as well as the southwest interior. And very tight gradient central interior now up to the Brooks Range and southward to the Alaska Range. So look for areas of snow and blowing snow. Again, the winter weather advisories, wind chill warnings, wind chill advisories in the windy areas there. And rain and snow pushing into the Panhandle, snow at the higher elevations, especially over toward the border, down toward sea level. And then trending toward rain out along the outer coastline, especially from Sitka southward along Prince of Wales Island. Probably looking at rain in the afternoon periods of. And Kodiak Island, rain or snow showers, rain at lower elevations, could be some snow higher elevations above 1,000 feet. Same thing for the Alaska Peninsula, possible gale force winds ahead of that front coming in, again for the mainly Cold Bay area. Lighter winds for the eastern Aleutians and a pretty intense low now over the southern Bering Sea. Keeps it quite windy over the western central Aleutians with rain and snow showers with snow. Again, not quite reaching St. Lawrence Island, kind of right on the edge there. Clear skies and windy conditions across the Seward Peninsula into the Noatak Valley and the western Arctic coast with light winds and clear skies, dry conditions, North Slope and eastern Arctic coast there. And temperatures will stay well below zero up in that area the next couple of days. Lows tonight, 35 to 45 below central and northeast interior areas, back down to maybe 35 below again, the Copper River Basin, Gulkana, and single numbers around 10 over the northern Panhandle, to mid-20s down toward Dixon Entrance, mid-30s Kodiak Island, and single numbers south central Alaska, 10 to 25 below again, the Susitna Valley. Squetna was 26 below this morning, could see that again tomorrow morning. Mid-teens to lower 20s, Bristol Bay, lower 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, upper 20s, central Aleutians, mid-20s in the Pribilofs, 4 degrees, St. Lawrence Island, and quite a contrast there across the Seward Peninsula, looking at Nome, low of 3 above, but Shishmaref 17 below, Kotzebue 25 to 30 below. Highs for Tuesday afternoon, again well below zero, north of the Alaska Range, west of the Alaska Range, coming above zero, mid-teens in the Kuskokwim Valley, mid-20s southwest coast, lower to mid-30s for Bristol Bay, near 40 along the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, upper 30s out west, lower 40s Kodiak Island, mid-20s south central Alaska, near 20 in the Susitna Valley, staying below zero in the Copper River Basin, Tanana Valley, and upper teens northern Panhandle to mid-30s for Craig, Klawock, Metlakatla, Ketchikan. Lows Wednesday morning, staying well below zero north of the Alaska Range. Anywhere at Fairbanks, maybe 35 below to 45 below in the Yukon Flats, 20 to 35 below North Slope in the Arctic coast, and teens, warmer south of the Alaska Range. Mid-teens for the Susitna Valley now, upper teens near 20 for northern Cook Inlet, Anchorage, and the Kenai Peninsula, mid-20s Homer, mid-30s Kodiak Island, mid-teens northern Panhandle to lower 30s to the south, and Wednesday morning lows in the mid-30s for the eastern Aleutians, lower 30s. And then that'll warm to near 40 for the Adak-Atka area, lower 40s on Alaska, near 40 for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, 30 to 35 Bristol Bay, into the 20s. South central Alaska, lower 40s southern Panhandle, and staying below zero north of the Alaska Range, 10 to 15 below for the central interior, although Tanana, Galena, maybe 21 below for your highs, and 15 to 25 below for the North Slope.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, we've got some IFR eastern Arctic coast and North Slope with the blowing snow condition there. Marginal VFR back to about Wainwright. Otherwise, south of the Brooks Range VFR all the way down into Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, Panhandle starting out mostly VFR for tomorrow morning. IFR, though, overspreading Kodiak Island into southern Cook Inlet. Both Kamishak, Kachemak Bay, marginal VFR moving into Resurrection Bay. And IFR in across Bristol Bay and the southwest coast, northern Bering Sea or St. Lawrence Island, VFR all the way up into the Chukchi Sea. And for the afternoon, IFR still hanging on to the eastern Arctic coast with marginal VFR again back to about Wainwright, down to the Brooks Range on the east side, and marginal VFR spreading northward into northern Cook Inlet, southern Susitna Valley, Madanuska Valley, and into the Coast Range in the North Gulf Coast with IFR along the outer coastline, moving into Prince William Sound. Cook Inlet, IFR north to Kenai and westward there across the southern two-thirds of the Kuskokwim Valley out to the just north of Cape Romanzoff, St. Matthew Island, Nunivak Island, Bristol Bay, all IFR. And VFR breaking out for the Fox Islands, Western Alaska Peninsula, most of the Bering Sea marginal, a little bit of IFR along and just south of Atka with the system farther to the south, and marginal VFR building along the southern panhandle. For Wednesday morning, solid IFR for the southeast coast, up into the Copper River Basin, and narrow band there extending westward out to mostly the Yukon Delta, northern Kuskokwim Delta, and across Nunivak Island, but staying VFR for St. Lawrence Island, Pribilof's IFR, and most of the Aleutians IFR, except for Unalaska Island, and IFR south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Wednesday afternoon, IFR, northern part of Lynn Canal Glacier Bay and the Yakutat area, as well as over toward Stewart, Hyder, Misty Fjords, looking pretty IFR-ish, otherwise marginal VFR for the Panhandle. East side of Kodiak Island, Akiak, Sitkinak, on up to Chiniak Marmot Bays there, IFR, Shelkoff Strait, Fognak Island, marginal. Much of southern Alaska there, as you can see, marginal VFR. And some VFR out over the Alaska Peninsula and Alaska Island, but IFR moves back into Adak and Atka and extends all the way out to Shimia and Attu. And for Anatuvik, VFR flying for the day tomorrow, as well as Adigan. IFR, Lake Clark and Merrill, especially on the eastern approach. Marginal VFR for rainy, especially on the eastern entrance. And for windy, VFR the entire day, although there'll be an increase in the clouds. Isabel, VFR. Mentasta, VFR, but increasing clouds throughout the day, but staying VFR. And for Tanita, marginal VFR. Portage, IFR. And Chilkoot and White, looks like it'll stay VFR, though thickening, lowering clouds throughout the entire day. Probably anything lower than VFR will hold off till evening. Freezing levels, southerly flow pushing the 6,000 foot freezing level up across the Alaska Peninsula, 4,000 feet up across Kuskokwim Bay, and 2,000 feet up to the Yukon River there in the Delta. At the surface, right across northern Cook Inlet and north of the Coast Range now, and cutting across the northern panhandle, north of the Pribilofs line, right across St. Matthew Island. Icing, a lot of moisture coming up from south to north into southern Alaska with some considerable moderate rime icing passing over Kodiak Island late tonight, tomorrow afternoon shifting up to the southern Kenai Peninsula, Kachemak Bay area, and about to push into southern Prince William Sound with increasing icing threats along the coast of the Panhandle only throughout the day. And the next batch just south of the central Aleutians. And for the jet stream, west-northwest 105 knots eastern interior, now east of the Panhandle 150 knot northerlies. A couple of weak lows, one over Bristol Bay, westerlies 90 knots over the southeast Bering, cutting across the Alaska Peninsula area. And 9,000 feet, looking at easterly winds over the northern Bering Sea up to 65 knots just south of St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, south-southwest 40 knots, North Gulf Coast area, and lighter over the Panhandle in the interior. 3,000 foot wind showing some pretty strong easterlies, 55 knots central interior, up to 70 knots there, Norton Bay, and across the Bering Strait area, southeast 60 knots into the western North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula. Look for widespread moderate turbulence, mechanical turbulence from the northern Panhandle right up across the interior to the western Arctic coast. and otherwise areas of light to isolated moderate turbulence to the south.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again talking about the augmented reality sandbox is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version. Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney. And
this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. Allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool, and
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
Well, that's what happened at GINA up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such, we had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that and to see how it reacts in time, and
Right.
it's a dynamic learning tool, and it
Dynamic,
responds.
That's exactly the word.
And
Yeah.
you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching
Right.
tool for
Where does it
topography
go?
can it have? You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work with GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding the weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
Wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney, thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the sea ice analysis for the 30th of January. Look closely there. St. Paul Island, the red dot, and then comparing it to today's, you'll see the south winds caused the ice to retreat from, the Pribilofs in toward southern Bristol Bay. As we'll see here going to the next slide. You can see it pull back there again, and that's going to continue at least for another day or so. So from there, moving on to coastal water forecast. South coast of the Panhandle, southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, 8 to 10 foot seas. Otherwise, gale warnings in the forecast for the North Gulf or for the north coast of the Panhandle for east to southeast winds sustained 35 knots. Southern Interchannel, southeast 20 with gale force gusts to 35 knots. Stevens Passage, northeast winds at 25 knots, 5 foot seas. Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, northwest winds 25 knots, occasional gusts up to 40 knots. And for Wednesday, Northern Interchannel, small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots. Stevens Passage, southeast winds at 20 knots, and small craft advisories for Clarence Strait. Winds will be southeast at 25 knots. And out along the coastline, pretty uniform as far as wind speeds and wave heights go. Seas around 10 feet with southwest winds at 25 knots. Prince William Sound looking at a northeast wind at 25 knots tomorrow. Seas at about 6 feet. Good gales for the North Gulf Coast. East-northeasterlies 40 to 45 knots. Seas around 15 feet. Storm warnings out for the Barren Islands. East winds sustained 50 knots. Seas just under 20 feet. And 40 knot north to northeast winds for southern Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay. And brisk wind advisories for northern Cook Inlet for northeast winds at 25 knots. Those fall back to north of 20 knots, northern Cook Inlet on Wednesday. South of the Forelands, though, gale warnings continue. North 35 knots, northeast 40 knots, Kamishak Bay. Barren Islands come down a little bit there, at least under storm force category. Under the storm force category, high-end gales east 45 knots. Minimum gales for the western North Gulf Coast, northeast at 35, and small craft advisories for the Middleton Island area. East winds 30 knots. Prince William Sound north at 15. Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait will see the strongest winds in that area with direction at northeast of 40. Otherwise, southeast winds 30 knots. Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisories on the Bering Sea side, south 35 knots. Pacific side, southwest 20. And for Bristol Bay, brisk wind advisories, east winds 30 knots. Those become gale force winds on Wednesday for Bristol Bay, southeast coming up to 35 knots sustained, and the Alaska Peninsula, east-southeast, 30 knots, and actually from Cape Sarachev to Sitkinak, winds will be southeast at 30 knots. East side of Kodiak Island, east winds 30 knots. Shelikof Strait, good gales, north at 40. For the eastern Aleutians, Unalaska Island, southeast winds 15 to 25 knots. Unmak Island, east winds 30 to 35 knots. Adak and Atka, east winds 30 to 40 knots. And 35 knot easterlies in the forecast from Chitka Island. Kiska to Shimia, looking at a southeast wind at 30 knots, seas 18 feet. They'll swing around to the west at 30 knots from Shimia all the way to Amchitka Island. Adak and Atka, gale warning, southwest 40 to 45 knot winds, 17 to 29 foot seas. And for Unmak Island, south to southwest, 45 knots. On Alaska Island, lighter winds, south to southwest 30 to 35 knots. The southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, gale warnings, east winds 35 knots. Northern Bering Sea to St. Lawrence Island, northeast winds 35 knots. Yukon Delta coast east at 30. Notice the Pribilofs, light winds northwest at 15. And then for the day Wednesday, those will swing around to gales out of the east, 35 knots, St. Paul, St. George, 45 knot easterlies, northern Bering Sea. Southwest coast, east to northeast, 35 to 40 knots, gale warnings for St. Lawrence Island, northeast at 40. Central eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west-northwesterlies at 10 knots, west side, northeast at 15. Brisk wind advisories from Cape Beaufort to Wales for northeast winds at 25 knots. That holds about steady there from Wales to Cape Beaufort, northeast to 25 to 30 knots. Picking up a little bit in the western Arctic coast, northeast at 20 knots, north 15 for the central and eastern Arctic coast. For tonight, winds really diminish there on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, maybe some flurries left over, but winds on the increase across central and southern Alaska with a wind chill warning kicking in later tonight through tomorrow for the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country for cold wind chills, and snow moving into southern Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula with that front. Snow changes to rain, Kodiak Island, periods of rain, less wind for tomorrow for Kodiak, and mixed rain and snow developing Bristol Bay, North Gulf Coast with a warmer air.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.